Welcome to the 16th meeting in 2013 of the Standards, Procedures and Public Appointments Committee. Can I remind members, of course, to turn off their mobile phone. Agenda item 1. Our first item for the committee today is to agree whether to take the following items in private at future meetings. A draft report on its review of parliamentary reform and a paper on hybrid bills. And members agreed to take these items in private at future meetings. We're agreed. Agenda item 2 is on cross-party groups. The next item on the agenda is to take evidence from Alec Johnson, MSP, on the proposed cross-party group on Japan. And then John Mason, MSP, on the proposed cross-party group on rail. Can I welcome Alec Johnson to the meeting and invite him to say a little bit about the purpose of the proposed group.
Thank you very much, Convener. This is not my first time in front of the Standards Committee, but it has been a long time and I've behaved myself a lot better since my first visit. The idea of creating a cross-party group in Japan is something which I've been considering over a long period of time. In fact, given the fact that there are so many cross-party groups and so many Eastern countries already represented, it's perhaps a surprise that nobody else has done it. I have been working closely with the Japanese representatives in the consulate in Edinburgh over a number of years. In fact, as early as 2006, I was able to organise a cultural evening here in the Parliament, which was extremely well attended by MSPs and in which we had a wide and broad cross-section of Japanese culture represented. We've also had the opportunity to represent the interests of sporting links with Japan, and more recently some members may have been able to look out their office window and see the extraordinary sight of the then Consul General of Japan, Mr Tarahara, bowling a cricket ball to my colleague Liz Smith, who was whacking it in my direction, and I was desperately trying to catch it before it broke a window, something I did successfully, I have to say. That relationship has now been replaced or Mr Tarahara has now been replaced by a new Consul General, Mr Kitaoka, who has arrived in Scotland in the past 2 months, and we were very grateful to have him as our guest speaker at the inaugural meeting which we held just over a month ago. That link is something that is very valuable to us. Our intention in taking this forward is to ensure that the group is dedicated to working with trade, cultural, educational and sporting links and promoting these with Japan. For that reason, it's our intention, if it meets with the approval of the committee, to take forward our first meeting in March of next year, where we hope to have Mr Jun Arima of the Japan External Trade Organisation talking extensively on the economic aspect of the links between Scotland and Japan. It's then our intention later in the year to take forward an evening similar to the one we had in 2006, where we can promote the cultural and economic links between Japan in a more social environment. With that in mind, it is our intention to ensure that this is a friendly group, one that promotes positive relations between Scotland and Japan, and one where communication is our priority. I have the advantage in that the Secretary of the group, Jim Miller, who works in my office, is currently working hard to learn the Japanese language, and he has a very effective fallback position in that his wife is a fluent speaker should he ever fall short of his own requirements. So with that said, Mr Convener, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that my proposal for a cross-party group on Japan will meet with your approval.
Thank you very much, Mr Johnson. I hope your assistant does not learn Japanese from his wife. As I understand, the male and female forms of the language are somewhat different.
Indeed. I have been informed about this already.
Colleagues, are there any questions that anyone wishes to ask Mr Johnson while we have them before us?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Alec, I just wanted to check on the section on financial benefits or other benefits. We're quite determined that we are completely transparent about cross-party groups, how they're funded, whether it's direct funding or whether it's in kind. And I wondered how that section could be left empty when you do hope to have, you've already mentioned, you hope to have a reception, which will presumably cost money.
We did successfully in 2006 hold a reception which was entirely dealt with in kind. There were no costs associated with that. Whether that would be possible in the current environment, I'm not sure. But it is our intention to make sure that this is a cross-party group which is not about trying to attract funding. It's about promoting the interests of those who wish to become members in a much broader sense. And it is my aspiration, let me say, to avoid this being simply an organisation that stages events which must find funding. I want to avoid that if at all possible. I think it's an area which some cross-party groups get rather bogged down in.
Didn't you?
Sorry.
You said that when you held the reception in 2006, you managed to hold it through gifts and in kind. We would still expect that to appear under this section. So how much, could you give what you think the reception would cost in that section?
It would be extremely hard for me to give a figure now, although I could attempt to get one for you.
I think we would probably want that. Thank you.
Chairman. Thank you. Good morning. Having been a frequent visitor to Japan, many times on business, a lot, I know that the Japanese are very generous on giving receptions and things like that, more than other people. So these things tend to be funded by the consulate and by Japanese companies who are trying to promote their wares. Is that the intention, that when you say it's going to be self-funding, that you will get sponsors in who want to sort of promote what they want to do, like beer and food and things like that? Is that your intention? Because most of I find Japan very self-funding. They're very keen to throw money at these sort of things, and I just wondered if it's going to be, rather like Fiona is saying, is it going to sort of, is it going to be definitely sponsored, everything going to be sponsored, or is it going to be quite open and transparent?
If everything will be open and transparent, I can assure you. However, I want to repeat the fact that we are not, through setting up this group, trying to get money out of people to do things. We want to keep the cost of this down and make sure that we are not simply trying to attract funding from potential sponsors as our main aim.
So, is it mainly going to be trade or cultural? What is the objective of the group?
We try to balance the issues of trade, culture, education and sporting links. And we have been involved in a number of them already. We have, as I said, had a cultural reception. More recently, we were involved in promoting the two of the Japanese cricket teams when they visited Edinburgh last year. And as a result, we are keen to ensure that this is balanced and it is not overtaken exclusively by trade. As a priority. We don't want to exclude trade. We know that there is significant links between Scotland and Japan in a trading sense, but we want it to be cultural, educational and sporting in at least equal measure.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kabina.
Thank you very much for coming, Mr Johnson. We'll have the clerks contact you once the committee has reached a decision on the matter. Could I now invite John Mason to step forward on behalf of the proposed cross-party group on rail? An interesting day to be here on that particular subject, if I may say so. If you'd like to let the committee know something about the proposed group, Mr Mason.
Thanks very much, Mr Stevenson, and thanks to the committee for, I think, at fairly short notice agreeing to have this. Normally on a Thursday morning I have Equal Opportunities Committee, so this was a suitable Thursday when it was not meeting. I'm glad to say I came through by train yesterday and stayed overnight in Edinburgh, so had less of a problem. To echo something of what Mr Johnson said, I'm also of the view that probably there are too many cross-party groups as a whole in Parliament, and I have not been involved in starting one before, and I have tended to keep my membership of groups to a limited ones that I'm seriously interested in. However, I do think that rail is such a major part of our infrastructure and of our lives in Scotland that it really does deserve its own group. And specifically, I was spurred on by two incidents that happened in recent months. One was that a number of people came to me who were particularly pushing for a Glasgow Crossrail and wanted a cross-party group just on that one item. And the second one was the setting up of the cross-party group on aviation. And on the first one, that made me think that rather than having a very specific group on one campaign issue, it would be much better to have a cross-party group right across rail, which could include all of these things and listen to all of these people and put forward ideas, but not so specifically on one small one, because that could have led to several cross-party groups. And secondly, the fact there was one on aviation, which I think is a good idea, but that is a major competitor really to rail in many cases, and it did seem to me that if aviation was going to have a strong voice in Parliament, it was logical that rail should as well. I'm keen to have a very wide and inclusive group with industry, user groups, trades unions. We had very well represented at the first inaugural meeting, and hopefully more people will join. For example, we did not have transport partnerships at the first meeting, but I would hope they might like to get involved in the future. I think it's clear that we have groups, we'll have groups attending who are campaigning on one specific issue perhaps, but I would not see the cross-party group as just kind of backing them, but much more of an overview. And I have to say I'm very encouraged by the interest so far, and if we are approved, I hope we can build on that.
Thank you. Do members of the committee have any questions for Mr Mason?
If I could, and good morning, John. You may remember that I attended your inaugural meeting, and I don't see my name on the list as a member, so I wish to express my interest as a member, although I'm not listed.
Well, my apologies for that.
I
think there are one or two omissions on this. I think another one is, although Alan McLean appears as secretary, he doesn't appear as an individual member. And I think actually Mary Fee, your colleague, was also there. So my apologies for that. We will go through this again. My hope is that the membership will increase, but my apologies that we seem to have missed out one or two.
Yes, as you heard from the previous speaker and around the costs, and are there likely to be any costs involved with the...
My hope is really not. One thing I was keen to do was to get a secretary who would be neutral and perceived as being neutral and not from one of the companies. Now, obviously, going forward, we'll have to continue to look at that. But at the moment, we have Alan McLean, who is retired from the rail industry, used to be with Virgin and elsewhere, and I think is widely respected. So my hope was that we would not be having expenses, would not be having receptions. We can certainly look at that in the future, but that was my intention to start with.
Thank you, Mr Mason. We will let you know of our decision via the clerks. Agenda item 3 is to discuss the evidence we've heard from Alec Johnson, the cross-party group on Japan, and John Mason on the proposed cross-party group on rail. Do members have any comments to make before we come to a decision?
On the cross-party group in Japan, I would really like if we agree to record its recognition, I would really like it conditional on he has to flesh out the benefits in kind section of the form.
Just to be clear in process terms, we either approve or don't approve today. Right. And it would seem to me that once a group is approved, there are requirements on reporting. Do you think that would meet your need, or are you suggesting there is a barrier to approval today?
I think there is a barrier, because we really have to be transparent and to say, as Alec Johnson said in reply, that he had held a reception before and it had covered its own costs through gifts and hospitality. That's exactly what that section asks for details on. So if he's talking about having another reception, I would have expected him to have gone back to his last one and projected costs to put in there.
What I'm hearing is that you're suggesting we cannot today approve, but neither today would we reject the approval. Cameron.
I was going to say, the Japanese are well known for sponsoring everything. That's what I was trying to get at. They're well known, and I'm sure that this thing won't probably cost us any money. I mean, I agree with Fiona that transparency is important, but the Japanese are probably the most generous of people for sponsorship. They're very keen on cultural links, sporting links, and Japan Cricket Association, for heaven's sake. You know, it's very laudable, but it's hardly what we're necessarily going to... It's not exactly... Well, I suppose it's sporting, but it's more... I don't really know. I mean, I think it's more cultural trade and everything. They're very keen and they love Scotland. So I don't think there'll be a problem with the finance, but I do think we need to be transparent on it. But I wouldn't hold it personally as a barrier. I think it'll be okay.
I agree with Fiona. I think Mr Johnson didn't actually understand what the question Fiona was making. I think he thought it was actually the fact that, yes, that's well and good, that there's companies and there's organisations that will actually, but it's important that we actually have it down and as a figure of sorts so that we can actually say, in the real world, that would cost X amount of pounds. And I think that's the whole point. And I think that's the point Fiona was making. But I think Mr Johnson didn't quite pick up on that. When even Cameron tried to press him on it, I think he still didn't pick up on that part. So Fiona might have an idea that it's probably better if we do ask them for a wee bit more kind of detail at this stage.
The sense I'm taking from colleagues on the committee, therefore, is that we shall not approve today. We shall require Mr Johnson to provide the necessary financial information, but that our expectation is that we will be able to approve this in future, at a future meeting. Is that what the committee is saying to me?
Absolutely. I think that would keep it consistent with what we've done in previous applications.
Right.
I think it's important to put that rider in that we are going to approve it in a sense, rather than
we are minded to approve.
Right,
I think
right,
would be the correct phrase.
But I don't disagree. I actually do think we need to sort of flesh the thing out a bit, and he was rather vague. And I think having had the reception, having had the reception already, which had been sponsored by the Japanese, it's slightly unusual to have that before the group is approved in a way, isn't it? I don't know.
2006.
Oh, right. Oh well. Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
so in relation to the Japanese group, we will not approve today. We will write to Mr Johnson. He will be able to read the official report that we are minded to approve, but there is a requirement to be met first. And invite him to bring that in very early course so that we don't disrupt the plans that there are. In relation to the cross-party group on rail, are there any comments anyone wishes to make? In that case, yes.
Just one, I would normally have asked when it's under the financial benefits, not applicable, but John Mason answered that in telling us that their secretary is actually a retired person, so there's not even going to be anything in kind. This man's going to do it entirely off his own bat. Amazing.
He must be a keen rail man.
I know the individual, and I think he most certainly is.
Right.
So, are members prepared to agree to accord recognition of the cross-party group on rail today?
Sorry, just one small rider. The fact that Margaret McDougall picked up that her name wasn't on the form, we really need the forms filled in absolutely correctly.
Okay, but we are minded to approve today. Yes, right. Okay, thank you very much. That ends the public part of the meeting. We now move into private session.